I always thought that family was the one place you could never be betrayed. Growing up, I held tightly to the belief that no matter how cruel the world could be, home would always mean safety, comfort, and love. I was wrong. My sister, Alina, was only 2 years older than me, and for most of my childhood, she had been my best friend. We shared secrets at night, whispered about our dreams, and laughed over silly things. To me, she was everything a sister should be: supportive, protective, and loving. But somewhere along the way, her heart had shifted. Perhaps it was jealousy, perhaps it was greed, or maybe it was the cold satisfaction she got from watching me stumble. I didn't see it coming. Alina had always been my parents' pride. She had a natural charm, a way of twisting her words so that they sparkled like diamonds in the air. Teachers adored her, neighbors praised her, and my parents, they never seemed to look at me the same way they looked at her. Where she was the golden daughter, I was the shadow that followed behind. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself that love wasn't a competition, but the older we grew, the sharper her edges became. She began planting little seeds in my parents' minds. If I was late coming home, she'd whisper that I was probably wasting time with the wrong crowd. If I struggled with my studies, she would sigh dramatically and tell my parents she was worried about me. On the surface, it sounded like care. In reality, it was poison. One evening, as I helped set the dinner table, I overheard her in the kitchen with my mother. "She's so careless, Mama," Alina said in that sweet, syrupy voice. "You work so hard, and she doesn't even appreciate it. Sometimes I wonder if she really loves this family the way I do." My mother didn't answer immediately, but her silence spoke louder than words. I stood there, frozen, my hands clutching a plate, my chest tight. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I loved this family more than anything, that I had given up countless things just to make them proud. But I stayed silent. That was my mistake. I gave her too much power by letting her voice fill the silence where mine should have been. Things escalated quickly after that. My father began looking at me differently. His once warm eyes now carried suspicion, as though he was waiting for me to fail. If I came home tired, he accused me of being lazy. If I didn't smile enough, he said I was ungrateful. I could feel myself shrinking under their gaze while Alina bloomed brighter every day. The breaking point came on a cold winter night. I had just returned from helping a classmate with her project. It had taken longer than expected, and by the time I walked into the house, snowflakes clung to my hair and my fingers were numb. My parents were waiting in the living room, their faces grim. "Where were you?" My father barked. I explained, my words stumbling over each other, but Alina was quicker. She stepped forward, her expression full of fake concern. "Papa, she's lying," she said softly, yet every word was sharp enough to cut me. "I saw her with some boy earlier this week. She's been sneaking around. I didn't want to tell you, but I can't hide it anymore." Her lie hung in the air like smoke, choking me. "That's not true," I cried, my voice trembling. I wasn't. But my father didn't let me finish. His hand slammed against the arm of the chair. "Enough, we have given you everything, and this is how you repay us. Shameful." I turned to my mother, hoping for even a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but she looked away. Her silence was heavier than my father's anger. That night, Alina's plan reached its cruel peak. My father ordered me to leave the house. My mother didn't protest, and Alina stood behind them, her lips curved in the faintest smile. "You want to ruin this family," my father roared. "Fine, you're no longer part of it. Get out." I begged, pleaded, my tears spilling like rain, but they wouldn't listen. They shoved a thin shirt into my hands, the one I had been wearing earlier, and pushed me out into the freezing night. The door slammed shut behind me. I stood there, shivering in the biting wind, the sound of my sister's laughter echoing faintly from inside. The people I loved most in this world had cast me aside, and the one I trusted the most had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. But as the snow swirled around me and the night pressed heavy on my shoulders, a thought began to burn quietly in my chest. This wasn't the end. The night air sliced through my thin shirt like knives, each gust of wind reminding me of how fragile I had suddenly become. I stood frozen in front of the door that had just shut me out, waiting, hoping, praying that someone inside would realize the cruelty of what had happened. But the laughter that drifted faintly from the living room told me otherwise. They weren't going to open it. My own family had cast me away as though I were a stranger. I hugged my arms tightly around myself, shivering as the snow fell thicker. My bare feet crunched on the icy ground as I stumbled toward the gate. Each breath came out in a trembling cloud of white. The betrayal still burned fresh in my chest, sharper than the cold itself. I remembered how many times I had stood in that very house cooking dinner when my mother was too tired, helping Elena with her school projects when she was stuck, or staying awake late into the night just to make sure my father had hot tea ready after work, and yet none of those sacrifices mattered. A single lie had been enough to erase me from their hearts. I started walking, unsure of where to go. The streets were empty, lit only by the occasional flicker of a street lamp. Snow crunched under my steps, and the thin shirt clung to me, damp with melting flakes. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. I thought of knocking on a neighbor's door, but shame held me back. How could I explain that my own parents had cast me out? What story could I tell that wouldn't shatter me even more? No one needed to see me like this. As the hours dragged on, the cold seeped deeper into my bones. My fingers turned stiff, my lips numb. I curled up on a bench at the edge of the park, pulling my knees to my chest. Tears froze on my cheeks as I tried to stay awake, because I knew if I closed my eyes for too long, I might not wake again. It was then, in that moment of despair, that I realized something painful yet powerful. I had nothing left to lose. The thought both terrified and strengthened me. My family had abandoned me, my sister had betrayed me, and my life as I knew it was gone. But somewhere in the ruins of that night, a tiny flame flickered. If I had survived their cruelty, then maybe, just maybe, I could survive anything. Hours passed before I heard the crunch of footsteps approaching. I stiffened, fear rushing through me. A shadow loomed, then a gentle voice broke through the icy silence. "Miss, are you all right?" I looked up, blinking against the blur of snowflakes. A man stood there, middle-aged, wrapped in a heavy coat. He peered down at me with concern. I wanted to speak, but my voice cracked into a whisper. I don't have anywhere to go." Without hesitation, he draped his scarf around me. "Come on, you'll freeze to death out here." He led me toward a small cafe at the corner of the street that, by some miracle, was still open. The warmth inside was overwhelming, and the smell of freshly baked bread nearly brought me to tears. He ordered me a hot drink and watched me carefully as I tried to stop shivering. When I finally found my voice again, I told him bits of the truth. Not everything, just enough for him to understand that I had no home anymore, that my family had turned me away. He nodded slowly, not pressing for details. "Sometimes the ones who should protect us are the ones who hurt us most," he said softly. "But listen to me. Don't let their cruelty decide your worth. You're stronger than this night, you'll see." His words planted something in me. For the first time since being shoved out into the cold, I felt a strange kind of comfort. A stranger had shown me more kindness than my own blood had. He didn't have much, but he gave me a place to stay for the night, an old storage room above the cafe, warm enough to keep me alive. As I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling, the events of the night replayed in my mind. My sister's triumphant smirk, my parents' cruel silence, my own pleading cries ignored. I clutched the borrowed blanket tighter around me. I had been thrown away like I was nothing, but one day I would return, not to beg, not to explain, not to forgive. I would return to show them exactly what they had lost. And when that day came, my sister's victory would turn into her greatest regret. The first nights after being thrown out blurred together in a haze of pain and disbelief. I woke each morning half expecting it to have been a nightmare, only to remember that it was reality. My sister had succeeded in tearing my family away from me. My parents had believed her lies, and I had been left with nothing. But sometimes losing everything is what forces you to rebuild yourself from the ground up. The kind man from the cafe, his name was Rahim, let me stay in his little storage room above the shop for a while. It wasn't much, a small mattress, a thin blanket, and a cracked window that rattled in the wind. But it was more shelter than the streets could ever offer, and I was grateful. In return, I began helping out at the cafe cleaning tables. washing dishes, sweeping floors. At first, I was clumsy, my mind too clouded with grief to focus. But day by day, I grew steadier, the work kept me busy, and the warm smiles from customers began to stitch something inside me that had been torn apart. Rahim treated me with quiet respect. He never pried too deeply into my past, but sometimes, when he caught me staring blankly at the snow outside, he would say, "Don't let the darkness they gave you become the darkness you live in. You're worth more than their lies." Those words sank into me. Slowly, I stopped looking backward and started looking forward. I found small ways to improve myself. When the cafe was quiet, I borrowed old books Rahim kept in a dusty corner and read them late into the night. I studied business basics, stories of people who had risen from nothing, tales of survival and triumph. I wanted to believe that I could be one of them. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, haunted by the sound of my father's anger, my mother's silence, and my sister's laughter. But each tear was fuel. Each memory of betrayal hardened my resolve. I decided that my sister wouldn't get the ending she wanted. She wanted me broken, erased, forgotten. I would give her the opposite. Months turned into a year. I saved every bit of money I earned at the cafe, sometimes skipping meals just to tuck away a little more. Eventually, I rented a small room of my own and enrolled in evening classes. I worked during the day and studied at night, exhaustion clinging to me like a second skin, but I kept going. My sister's face haunted me whenever I thought of giving up. The memory of her smug smile on the night I was cast out became the fire that kept me alive. Meanwhile, through whispers from old neighbors I occasionally ran into, I learned bits about my family. Elena was thriving in her parents' eyes. She wore fine clothes, flaunted her beauty, and bathed in attention. But the whispers weren't all kind. Some spoke of her arrogance, her selfishness, her talent for manipulation. The same poison she had used on me was slowly dripping into other parts of her life. It gave me no comfort yet. But I knew time would reveal the cracks. Years passed. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had climbed higher than I ever imagined. I managed to start a small business of my own, something I had built from the very skills I had once thought worthless. What began as a modest catering service from Rahim's cafe grew into a respected company that people trusted. Hard work, sleepless nights, and relentless determination had carved me into someone my past self wouldn't even recognize. I no longer walked with my head down. I no longer cried myself to sleep. I was stronger than the girl who had been pushed into the snow with only a thin shirt. But even as my life blossomed, I never forgot where I came from. Betrayal leaves scars that never fade. And though I had built myself anew, one truth remained: I would return, not to beg for acceptance, not to ask for love, not to mend what was beyond repair. I would return to show my sister and my parents that the girl they threw away had risen higher than they could ever imagine. The sweetest revenge would not be to destroy them, it would be to thrive without them, and to let them witness it with their own eyes. The day I returned to my family's doorstep was nothing like the night they cast me out. That night I had been a broken girl in a thin shirt, trembling in the snow, begging for scraps of love from people who had turned their backs on me. But now I was no longer that girl. I was a woman forged in fire, standing tall in strength and dignity. My life was no longer defined by their cruelty, but by the empire I had built from nothing. I hadn't planned on seeing them again, not until fate decided otherwise. An invitation had arrived in my office, ironically, sent by Alina herself. It was for her grand engagement party, a lavish celebration she wanted the entire community to witness. She had no idea the businesswoman she was desperate to impress was the very sister she had betrayed. I could have ignored it. I could have lived my life in peace, letting my success speak for itself, but something inside me stirred. Closure, justice, the chance to finally let them see what they had thrown away. The night of the event, the hall glittered with chandeliers and silk drapes. Guests in elegant clothes whispered about the perfect daughter and her wealthy fiancé, and then I entered. Heads turned, eyes widened. Whispers filled the room. I was no longer the quiet, unwanted girl they remembered. I wore confidence like armor, success like a crown. My presence silenced even the loudest laughter. Elena froze the moment she saw me. Her painted smile faltered, her glass of wine trembling in her hand. My parents, standing proudly by her side, went pale as if they were seeing a ghost. "You," my mother whispered, unable to finish the sentence. I gave her a small smile. "Yes, me." The room fell into silence as I walked toward them, every step measured, every breath steady. Elena tried to recover her composure, forcing a laugh. Well, look who decided to show up. I thought you'd vanished for good." Her words dripped with arrogance, but her eyes betrayed her fear. She hadn't expected me to rise. She had expected me to stay broken, lost, forgotten, vanished. I tilted my head. No, I was building something far bigger than the lies you told. I turned slightly, letting the crowd hear. "You see, years ago, I was cast out of my home because of a story my sister made up. A story my parents believed without question. They threw me into the cold with nothing but a thin shirt. They told me I was worthless." Gasps spread across the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Alina and my parents. "But the thing about being thrown away," I continued, my voice steady, "is that sometimes the broken pieces turn into something stronger. I survived, I fought, and now I stand here not as a victim, but as proof that betrayal can't destroy you." A determined soul. Alina's fiancé looked at her, his brows furrowed. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Alina stammered, her charm crumbling. She's twisting the story. She's always been jealous of me." But her lies fell flat. The room no longer adored her. They looked at her with suspicion, disgust. The golden daughter's shine was fading before their very eyes. My father's face was flushed with shame. My mother's hands trembled. They wanted to speak, but what words could erase what they had done? None. I took a step closer, meeting my sister's panicked gaze. "Do you know what the sweetest revenge is, Alina?" I asked softly, so only she could hear. "It's not destroying you. It's living so well that you have to watch it every single day. And tonight, everyone sees you for what you really are." Her face crumbled. For the first time, I saw fear replace her smug confidence. I straightened and turned to leave, not because I was defeated, but because I had already won. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their love. I had outgrown them. As I walked out of the glittering hall, whispers rose behind me. People no longer admired Alina. They questioned her, judged her. And my parents, they stood in silence, forced to face the truth they had ignored for years. The night air met me as I stepped outside, but this time it wasn't biting or cruel. The cold no longer owned me. I was free. The girl they had cast out with only a thin shirt had risen higher than they could ever imagine. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.